Hey, Nick Dearbertis here, teaching you financial modeling. Today, we're talking about basic iteration and how it applies to financial models. This is part of the segment, Getting Started with Python and Excel, where we're exploring building a basic retirement model in both Excel and Python. We've already built out the most basic Excel and Python models, and now we're looking at how we can extend those models. So we have the basic result. How long is it going to take for Martha to retire, which was this 36.7 years with our basic inputs that we decided on. But there's a number of assumptions that went into that, both in terms of the inputs values as well as the structure of the model. But one important key assumption here is that we assumed that Martha is going to earn 5% on her investments. But in reality, we know that an investment rate is very rarely guaranteed. Most likely, she's going to end up earning a different rate of return on her investment, and so we really need to evaluate how long it's going to take to retire under a bunch of different scenarios for the investment rate. Now we want to do that, but say we want to look at 10 different investment rates. We don't want to go and implement everything that we just did 10 separate times, right? That would be a lot of work, even for such a basic model as we have built. So we need to actually bring this concept of iteration into our models to be able to answer these kinds of questions without having to repeat what you've done. So, in both financial modeling as well as just in programming in general, it's often the case that you have some process and you want to repeat that process on a bunch of different inputs to get a bunch of different outputs. So that is what we refer to as iteration, is just doing the same process on a bunch of different inputs. So the way that you accomplish this in Excel is once you've got your formula in a cell, which has cell references, then you click on the corner of the cell and you drag that in whichever direction, and that's going to then repeat that formula over and over, and it's going to take the cell references, and if they're relative references, it's going to move them by the same amount that you're moving the formula, dragging the formula. Whereas if it's a fixed reference, then it's going to stay where it is. And so that allows you to have, say you have a column of a bunch of different inputs and you have a calculation over here, you reference your number in the input over here, well, then you can drag it down and have it apply to all those different inputs. And we'll look at a concrete example of that in the next video. But that's the basic idea. Dragging formulas is your main way of doing iteration in Excel without having to go to VBA. So then in Python, as well as other programming languages as well, iteration is all about loops. This construct that we call a loop, and we're going to explore one main kind of loop in this class, and that's a for loop. There are other kinds of loops, but that's going to be the primary one we're going to focus on, and that just says for each different input I want to do something. That's all that a for loop means, is whatever code goes in the for loop, I'm going to run that for each one of my different inputs. So that's the basic concept. So just doing whatever operation, whatever code you have within that loop, whatever process, you're just going to repeat that for each one of your inputs. So just bird's eye kind of view. Here's Python iteration versus Excel iteration, doing the exact same calculation. So made this a very simple calculation so that we can just try to understand the structure of the iteration that makes it apply to multiple inputs. So this calculation here is just adding 2 to whatever the input is. So if we put in 5, we should get 7. If we put in 15, we should get 17. And so, the idea here is that our main calculation, we should only have to type it once, right? It's not typing 5 plus 7 and then 10 plus 12, or sorry, 5 plus 2 and then 10 plus 2 and then 15 plus 2. We just want to type, our reference plus 2 and then do our iteration to get it to apply to each one of these. Now, of course, in this very simple example, it's, probably even a little bit more work to do it this way, but as you go to more complicated things, it could be that your entire model runs within this loop, right? And then you're looking at your entire model for a bunch of different inputs or all sorts of different cases. And so there's far more complex things we can do with these loops. So we're just learning the structure here. So our 3 different inputs into this add to calculation are 5, 10, and 15. And we're expecting to get 7, 12, and 17 as our outputs here. So, in Excel, it would be, so these would be the hard-coded numbers here, and then these would be where the calculations are. And here I'm just showing, what would have been typed into this cell to be able to produce the output. So, you would start here, and you would type equals, and you would click this input cell, that would get the B4, and then you do plus 2. And then, from there, you drag it down, and this B5, this B6, those are automatically happening. Those were not typed. You type this once, and then you're able to drag it down, and it's able to repeat this calculation, this adding to calculation for each one of the inputs. So in Python, it looks a little bit different, but conceptually, we're doing the exact same thing. So here we've got our inputs, 5, 10, and 15. We have these 3 numbers in a list. We're going to talk more about that as we get into the Python basics, but a list is a type of object which holds other objects. So here we have a list of numbers. It's just a container basically to hold these 3 different numbers in one single variable. So we've got our 5, 10, 15 all in one variable here, and then we do our actual for loop. So with the for loop, we have 4 item and inputs. So that's saying, each time that this loop runs, it's going to run 3 times because we have 3 inputs. Each time it's going to pull one of these out of the loop. So the first time that it runs, we're going to get 5 coming out. The second time that it runs, we're going to get 10 coming out. And the third time, we're going to get 15. So you do this 4 item in inputs. Gotta have a colon at the end. Gotta have this indentation for everything within the for loop. Those are both very important. And then once you're in the for loop, we can do our calculation. So then we're taking our item, which the item here is our loop variable. So the loop variable is just, you call this whatever you want, and it represents each item that you're getting as you go through. So the first time you run, or so as it runs, it's going to execute 3 times in here. First time it's going to be 5, so it's going to add 5 to 2. You're printing that out, so that's why we get 7. And then it's going to then, come back around because we have more inputs, and the next time it's going to give us 10 as item. It's going to do 10 plus 2, 12, put that in a new value, print that new value, and so we get 12. And, final time again, it gets 15 this time for the item, adds 15 to 2, gets our new value as 17, and prints that new value. So that's the basic idea of iteration and, basically how you implement it in both Python and Excel. In the next couple of videos, we're going to actually implement that on our existing basic retirement models to see a little bit more in detail how these things work. So thanks for listening, and see you next time.